I spent 5 years believing that the only woman I had ever truly loved was a ghost and a traitor. For half a decade, I carried her absence inside me like a jagged piece of shrapnel embedded near my spine. Every time I moved, every time I made a billion-dollar shipping deal, every time I closed my eyes in an empty penthouse overlooking the gray Baltic Sea, that shrapnel twisted. I was Soren Lindqvist, the cold-blooded lion of Lindqvist Maritime. I was 34 years old, built like iron, with silver blonde hair cut short, steel blue eyes that never flinched, and a tailored charcoal gray wool suit that served as my armor against the world. Men feared my temper, but women feared my silence. I had made myself unfeeling, unapproachable, and utterly alone, all because of one person. Inaya. Even now, just saying her name in the quiet chamber of my mind causes my lungs to lock. 5 years ago, Inaya was 23, a brilliant corporate archivist with deep bronze skin, high cheekbones, dark coiled hair styled in a sleek low bun, and warm, dark brown eyes that could break down my thickest defenses with a single glance. She wore a simple cream cashmere turtleneck sweater that seemed to radiate a soft, effortless grace amidst the cold, steel and glass corporate monolith of my family company. I loved her in secret. I loved her with a silent, consuming intensity that terrified me. But 5 years ago, 50 million euros vanished from our offshore logistics accounts, and all digital trails pointed directly to her personal archive credentials. When I confronted her in the marble lobby, my heart bleeding behind my chest, she did not defend herself. She did not cry. She simply looked at me with those warm brown eyes, full of a profound and incomprehensible sadness, handed in her badge, and walked out into the rain. She vanished from Stockholm, from the industry, from my life. And I, in my blind, arrogant rage, branded her a thief. I locked her remaining personal files and the few private items left in her office desk into a heavy steel safe inside my private executive vault, vowing never to touch them again. Until today. Today, Lindqvist Maritime was liquidating its original harbor headquarters. The old stone building was scheduled for demolition by weekend, and my legal team demanded every vault be emptied, cataloged, or destroyed. I stood alone in the quiet executive sub-basement, surrounded by the smell of ozone, cold brass, and aged paper. The heavy safe stood open before me. I reached inside the dark steel void, my large hand brushing against a heavy rectangular tin box. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden, violent thud that startled me. I pulled the box out into the pale fluorescent light of the basement. The metal was cold against my calloused palms. I forced the hinges open, expecting to find old key cards or forgotten company ledgers. Instead, Resting on top of a stack of archived shipping manifests was a heavy physical envelope. It was pristine, untouched by dust, crafted from thick, cream-colored linen paper with gold foil trimming around its edges. My breath hitched. I recognized that stationery immediately. It was an embossed physical card from the straight-line Keepsake collection. I remembered the day she brought it to the office, months before the scandal. She had told me once, during a rare, quiet, late-night review of maritime records, that the truest feelings in human life could never be trusted to digital screens or rushed text messages. She believed that real love required weight. It required ink. It required something tactile that you could hold when the world fell apart. My fingers trembled, a subtle tremor I had not experienced in 5 years, as I opened the unsealed envelope and pulled out the heavy card. The tactile weight of the thick cotton cardstock felt impossibly heavy in my palm. I unfolded it. There, written in her familiar, elegant script, was a message addressed to me. It was dated the exact night before she disappeared. Soren, the card began. If you are reading this, it means the storm has passed, or perhaps that you finally decided to open the box I left behind. I know what you think of me tonight. I know you think I stole from your family. I know you think I sold your corporate secrets to our rivals in London. I saw the look in your eyes today, Soren, and it nearly broke me in two. My throat went dry. My steel blue eyes devoured the words, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it ringing in my ears. I am leaving tonight, her letter continued. I am leaving because it is the only way to save the man I love and the family he is trying so hard to protect. It was not me who transferred those funds. Soren. It was Julian. I froze. My breath trapped inside my chest like liquid ice. Julian. My half-brother. Julian had access to my personal network. The letter read, her handwriting slightly messier here, as if written in a frantic rush of tears. He forged my archivist credentials to move the money to pay off his massive gambling debts to offshore syndicates. He knew your mother's failing heart could not withstand another family scandal after your father's death. Julian threatened to release full documents that would destroy your mother's remaining health and bankrupt the company if I spoke the truth. He gave me a choice. Let him frame me and take the public blame, or watch him tear your mother's legacy down and ruin her final months on this earth. I sacrificed my name, Soren, so your mother could pass away in peace, surrounded by the dignity she deserved. I took the fall so you would not have to fight your own blood while holding your mother's hand in her final winter. I know you will hate me. I know you will look at my empty desk and wish you had never trusted me. But my love for you was never a lie. I could not let you lose your mother while fighting a war against your brother. I am taking the weight of his sin so you can stay whole. Always yours, Inaya. The letter slipped from my fingers, hovering in the air before drifting silently to the cold concrete floor. No, I whispered into the empty vault. No. No. A sound ripped from my throat. A choked, desperate gasp that sounded nothing like the ruthless executive I had built myself to be. The world around me shattered into a million sharp, suffocating fragments. My whole life, for the past 5 years, my bitterness, my icy detachment, my cruel dismissal of her memory, had been built on a horrific, monstrous lie. She had surrendered her entire career, her honor, her reputation, her future, all to protect my mother from heartbreak. To protect me. And how had I repaid her? I had let her walk out into the storm. I had leaved the worst of her. I had hated her. I fell to one knee on the hard floor, my tailored wool suit scraping against the concrete, picking up the card with hands that shook violently. I pressed the card against my chest, feeling the sharp embossed gold foil digging through my cashmere sweater into my skin. The physical reality of her words pressed directly against my bleeding heart. How many of us carry unsaid words until it is far too late? How many relationships are fractured, buried beneath silence, pride, and false assumptions, simply because we failed to put our true feelings into something real and permanent? This story is sponsored by Straight Line Cards. In a world full of temporary digital noise and forgotten text messages, Straight Line Cards helps you capture what truly matters. Through the Straight Line to Great Relationships collection, you can send an embossed physical card crafted from luxurious, heavyweight cardstock, paired with a beautiful personalized gift straight to the person who holds your heart. Whether you need to ask for forgiveness, express quiet gratitude, or tell someone they mean everything to you before time slips away, do not let your words stay hidden in the dark. Visit straightlinecards.com today. Choose a keepsake card that carries real weight, and make sure the people you love know the truth before it is too late. That is straightlinecards.com. I did not go back up to my penthouse. I did not return to the board meeting waiting for me on the top floor. I ran. I pushed through the glass revolving doors of Lindqvist Maritime into the pouring autumn rain. My driver startled as I tore the keys from his hand. I threw myself into the driver's seat of my vehicle, setting the physical card carefully on the passenger seat beside me, treating it like the most fragile, sacred object in existence. For 5 years, I had believed she was gone forever. But 2 years ago, a private investigator I had hired to trace corporate leaks mentioned a tiny, obscure detail in a dismissed file. A woman matching Inaya's description, living in a small, windswept fishing village on the western Swedish coast, hundreds of miles away from the city. At the time, I had ordered the investigator to burn the file, believing she was living off stolen wealth. Now, that address burned inside my brain like a flare in the dark. I slammed my foot onto the accelerator, the engine roaring as I cut through the rain-slicked highways heading west. The windshield wipers beat a steady, frantic rhythm against the glass. Outside, the night closed in, black and wild, rain beating violently against the aluminum frame of the car. How could I have been so blind? I remembered the day my mother died, 3 years ago. She had passed peacefully in her sleep, holding my hand, surrounded by quiet warmth. I had thought it was a mercy. I never knew that the mercy had been bought and paid for by the woman I drove away. Inaya had carried that quiet burden all alone in the cold, while I sat in my marble tower hating her. The drive took 5 agonizing hours. By the time I reached the coastal village of Stenson, the ocean storm was at its peak. Waves crashed thunderously against the black granite seawalls, throwing cold salt spray over the narrow cobblestone streets. The town was dark, sleep-bound, wrapped in fog and howling wind. I drove down the main lane toward the shoreline, my heart thrashing violently against my ribs. And then I saw it. At the edge of a weathered wooden pier, nestled between ancient stone salt houses, stood a small warm shop. A modest hand-painted wooden sign hung above the door, swinging softly in the wind. The Coastal Shelf Books. Inside, a single golden light glowed through the rain-streaked glass windows. I parked the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned pure white. I reached over, took the straight-line Keepsake card from the passenger seat, slipped it inside the inner breast pocket of my charcoal wool suit, right over my heart, and stepped out into the pouring rain. The rain soaked through my hair and saturated my suit within seconds, but I felt nothing. The cold wind howled off the North Sea, but my entire body was burning with a desperate, terrified heat. I walked up the low stone steps of the shop. Through the wet window, I saw her. Inaya. My heart stopped. The world narrowed down to a single point of light. She was standing behind a low wooden counter, sorting through a stack of old leather-bound books. She was 28 now. Her deep, bronze skin looked radiant under the warm hanging bulbs of the shop. Her dark coiled hair was held back in her signature sleek, low bun. She wore her familiar cream cashmere turtleneck sweater, the sleeves pulled slightly over her hands as she lifted a box of paper. She looked tired. There were delicate, soft shadows beneath her warm, dark brown eyes, but her high cheekbones and quiet beauty were completely unchanged. She looked like peace. She looked like home. She looked like everything I had thrown away. I pushed the heavy wooden door open. A brass bell chimed softly above my head. The chiming bell sounded like a thunderclap in the quiet room. Inaya did not look up immediately. She spoke softly, her melodic voice floating through the scent of old paper, dried lavender, and cedarwood. "We're closed for the evening," she said gently. "But if you need shelter from the storm, you may stay inside until the rain eases." Her voice hit me like a physical blow. Tears stung the back of my eyes, mixing with the rain streaming down my face. "Inaya," I said. My voice was barely a rough, broken whisper. She froze. The stack of paper in her hands remained suspended in midair. Slowly, as if afraid that turning around would summon a ghost, she turned to face the door. Her warm, dark brown eyes locked onto mine. The air pulled out of the room. She stepped back, her hand instantly rising to rest against her chest, her high cheekbones turning pale under her bronze skin. Her lips parted, but no sound came out for a long, terrifying moment. "Soren," she whispered softly, her voice trembling like a dry leaf in the ocean wind. I stood in the doorway, water dripping from my silver blonde hair onto the pine floorboards beneath my feet. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 5 long, wasted years. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice dropping to a fragile hush, her dark brown eyes swimming with sudden, unshed tears. "Soren, please. You need to leave. There is nothing for you here." I didn't move away. Instead, I stepped further into the warm room, closing the door behind me, shutting out the roar of the ocean storm outside. I reached inside my wetsuit jacket. My fingers touched the dry, preserved cotton card in my breast pocket. I pulled the straight-line keepsake card out and held it between us. Her eyes fell on the heavy cream card with its gold foil trim. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, a sudden, sharp sob tearing from her throat. "You opened the safe," she breathed, her knees visibly weakening as she leaned against the wooden counter for support. "I opened the safe," I said, my voice cracking completely, tears spilling freely down my cheeks now, blurring my vision. I read every single word. Inaya. Every single line. She closed her eyes tightly, turning her face away from me as tears trickled down her high cheekbones. "Why did you look?" She wept softly. It was meant to stay hidden. It was meant to be over. "Soren, I gave you your family. I gave you your mother's peace. Why couldn't you just leave it buried?" "Because I have spent 5 years dying inside." I cried out, stepping closer to her, my voice echoing through the timber beams of the bookstore. I spent 5 years hating the only woman who ever saw who I really was. I spent 5 years believing you were cold, when you were the only one warm enough to break your own heart just to spare mine. I stopped right in front of her. The scent of her, lavender, rain, and fresh cream cashmere, washed over me, tearing down every remaining wall of the ruthless magnate I had pretended to be. I dropped to my knees right there on the pine floorboards at her feet. "Soren, no," she gasped, trying to step back. But I gently reached out, my trembling hands coming to rest near her waist, not forcing her, just grounding myself in her presence. I looked up at her from the floor, my steel blue eyes stripped of all pride, all wealth, all power. I was nothing but a broken man begging for mercy. "My brother is in prison now," I confessed, my breath ragged. I spent the drive here executing warrants and turning over the real financial records to the authorities. Julian will answer for what he did. The company will survive, or it will burn. I don't care anymore. None of it matters. Inaya, none of it ever mattered without you. I took her hands in mine. Her hands were small, warm, and soft against my rough, wet skin. She did not pull away. I am so sorry. I sobbed, resting my forehead against her palms, my shoulders shaking violently as 5 years of buried grief and guilt came pouring out of me. I am so sorry I didn't trust you. I am so sorry I let you walk into the rain. I am so sorry I let you carry my family's sin on your shoulders. Please, Inaya, please tell me how to spend the rest of my life making this right. Silence fell over the small bookshop, broken only by the steady drumming of the storm against the window panes and the sound of my ragged breathing. Slowly, gently, Inaya lowered herself to her knees in front of me. She reached out, her fingers warm and soft as she framed my wet, cold face. She lifted my head until my steel blue eyes met her dark brown ones. Tears were spilling down her bronze cheeks, but there was no anger in her face. There was no bitterness. There was only that same profound, overwhelming warmth that had captured my soul 6 years ago. I never hated you. Soren, she whispered, her thumb gently wiping a tear from beneath my eye. Not even when you turned your back on me in that lobby. I knew why you were angry. I knew how much you were trying to protect your mother. I did what I did because I loved you. I loved you too much to let you watch your brother destroy everything your mother built. You ruined your life for me, I choked out. No, she said softly, shaking her head as a soft smile broke through her tears. I built a quiet life here. But every night, every single night when the storm came off the sea, I looked at the rain and wondered if you were ever going to open that box. She reached down, taking the straight-line keepsake card from my trembling hand, holding it between us, her fingertips tracing her own handwriting from 5 years ago. Words on paper don't fade. Soren, she whispered, her voice full of a tender, quiet grace. You finally found them. That means the storm is over. I pulled her into my arms. I wrapped my broad arms around her cashmere sweater, pulling her close against my chest until there was no space left between us. She rested her head against my neck, her dark coiled hair soft against my jaw, her small hands clutching the wet fabric of my suit jacket. I held her like a drowning man holding onto the shore, weeping softly into her skin, feeling the steady, warm rhythm of her heart beating against mine. Outside, the fierce ocean storm continued to howl against the coast. But inside the small wooden bookshop, the air was warm, still, and whole. I knew that 5 years of pain could not be erased in a single night. I knew I had a long road ahead to rebuild the trust I had shattered, to restore her name to the world, and to prove every single day that I was worthy of the sacrifice she had made. But as I held her in the quiet glow of the shop, feeling the tangible weight of her love wrapped around me, I knew that redemption had finally begun. I was no longer the ruthless, unfeeling magnate of Lindqvist Maritime. I was simply a man who had finally listened to the unsaid words of the woman he loved and spent the rest of his life keeping them safe. If you want more stories like this, like and subscribe.